Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Kellam. Welcome to Encounter. We're going to take a trip over to the farm today and see what's going on at the Engelbert farms in Nichols in Tioga County. I came that close to growing up on a farm, maybe that close. My dad was the president of Future Farmers of America in Union Endicott High School when he was a kid. And his full intention was to go to Cornell University and study ag. But two things stood in his way. One is he couldn't get out of geometry. I think it took him 3 times, and by that time Cornell had moved on. And then World War II broke out. But had Dad gotten in, my life would have been very different from what it is now. Having served a church in northern Vermont for about 10 years, I know something now about small family farms. Now, the Engelbert farms, would we call this a small family farm? Our guests are Kevin and Lisa Engelbert, and they have a rather substantial farm, and it's fully organic, and we're going to talk about how it got to be organic and what that means. So let's start first, a small family farm.
Technically, it probably still would be considered a small family farm because a lot of farms in this country are milking thousands of cows.
Ah, yes.
And we're a large farm for organic. I think my sons are milking around 210 cows right now, 200, which is quite large for an organic dairy farm.
Right.
But not compared to conventional operations.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit, this is unusual in that this is the 3rd location of this Engelbert farm.
Yeah.
It must be really something to move a farm, but tell me a little bit of the history.
Well, my great-great-grandfather came over from Germany, he and his brother, in 1848. They bought a farm at that time it was Conklin. Kirkwood didn't exist. Kirkwood and Conklin were just one township at that time. And they bought what was considered to be the nicest farm between Elmira and Oneonta in 1848. Yeah. And in 1860, the Civil War broke out and the government took the farm by eminent domain.
Right.
Well, obviously that's not what they expected coming to America from Germany. Yeah. So they moved the farming operation to Brentwood, Ontario, Canada, and farmed there for 6 years, but they didn't like it up there.
For 6 years?
For 6 years.
Yeah.
So then they moved the operation back to Conklin. And during that time, Kirkwood had separated and become its own township. So they were technically across the river, even though it was Conklin both times.
Right.
And they bought a farm actually right next to the original Conklin Presbyterian Church.
Ah.
And they farmed there until, they continued to farm there for quite a number of years. But my great-grandfather was one of the older sons, and the way the family custom was back then is if a younger son wanted to farm, the older son had to move out.
Okay, really?
So he ended up marrying a woman by the name of Ella Mae Boswick, who was a single child, on a farm in Conklin farther north. So at one time he was helping his brothers run the main farm, running his in-laws' farm, and also he had opened a butcher shop in Binghamton. He was doing all 3 things. Then in 1911, the Lackawanna Railroad bought the farm that his in-laws owned, and they decided, since his younger brother was going to stay on the farm farther south,
sure,
they would move to Nichols. So then my great-grandfather moved that part of the farm.
What year would that have been?
That would have been 1911.
1911. So it's been in Nichols since 1911.
Been in Nichols since 1911, yeah. I'm 4th generation there, 5th generation overall.
Yep. And Lisa, you've got a couple of sons, 2 sons?
We have 3 sons.
3 sons. So they're going to stay in farming?
Well, all 3 of them went to college, graduated from college, and came home to the farm out of college, and the oldest one has since taken a job off the farm.
Right.
So our middle son and youngest son are they're actually running the farm now.
Yeah. Thus, you can be here to tape this program.
Yes.
I thought not knowing that, I thought this might be difficult to pull folks in who had farm chores that begin really early in the morning and then run through the evening. I mean, it's a very, burdensome. But then the joys of farming too are what keep people in it.
You have to have that joy because it's as simply a struggle to survive farming.
Yeah.
You know, people in this area, if you pay attention driving any direction from Binghamton, you've got to go at least 30 miles before you see a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And we're the first farm west of Binghamton along the I-86 Route 17 corridor because all the other dairies along the river have either sold out, they've all sold out, either for development or gravel mining.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult operation.
Yeah. So I mentioned early in the morning, were you, back in Vermont, we called, people like me who were not farmers, early farmers and late farmers. The early ones would be getting up sometimes at 3:30 and 4 in the morning. Mm-hmm. The later ones, who were kind of looked down upon by the early ones, might be in the barn at 9. And they'd think, well, what difference does it make? The cows, just every 12 hours, just as long as you get them milked.
Yeah, no, we were.
They don't care, do they?
We were early farmers.
Okay.
Yeah, or I was.
Yeah.
I was up at 4:30 for 7 days a week for over 30 years.
Yeah, but no more.
No more. No.
But our boys are still early.
My boys are still early farmers.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't milk cows anymore.
Right.
They've taken over that
Yeah.
the operation, and I didn't expect them to.
Yeah.
Because we've had some really hard times over the last.
Well, the flood, for example,
yes,
or floods.
Floods.
Yes.
Devastating floods.
Yeah.
And you can't just. It's not easy to move a farm. And when they settled there in Nichols, we didn't have floods like we do now.
Wow.
You know, same with the village. They built a dike around it because, well, with all the development upstream, the water gets to the river faster. There's fewer, there's more blacktop, more roads, more ditches, more drainage tiles, more parking lots, and everything just gets the water to the river. Nothing holds it back like it used to. And then in the early 60s, the New York State Department of Environment, DEC, decided that you can't clean the river anymore. So it's the last 50, 60 years, it's filled up with debris and doesn't have the capacity to hold water like it did. So it takes very little now for the river to come up.
Yeah.
And that played a role in how we became organic. My dad went to Cornell, was very progressive. In the 60s, we were the biggest taxpayer in the Tioga Center School District. So he didn't want to buy more land.
Right.
He wanted to get production as high as he possibly could with the land that we had. So he farmed intensively, was the first one to start using chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, all the new technology that was becoming available.
Right.
He was the first one that started using it. And because our farm tends to be very low level, we had fields that flooded quite often. So he stopped rotating crops because it was expensive to establish hay fields. So those fields he used to keep the highest fields that flooded the least often, he kept in hay fields. The ones that flooded the most often were in corn every year. But it got to the point by the middle 60s, we were starting to have troubles with herd health in our cows. So he eventually talked the vet center to come every Thursday to treat cows. And I mean treat cows that were sick with infections in their udders, that they would implant antibiotics in their uteruses.
Right.
They would trim feet because their feet weren't growing properly and developing abscess. And, all these things were starting to happen. And I remember in 79, I moldboard plowed 200 acres and only counted 6 earthworms over that entire 200 acres.
My gosh.
Well, the wake-up call, my wake-up moment was in the summer of 79. I graduated from college in May and went to the Federal Land Bank to borrow money. We had to buy 20 bred heifers just to maintain our herd size.
Right.
But I thought that was a pretty big deal, being able to get just out of college and going to borrow 20 grand and being told if you need more, let us know. And so we were at a family picnic, and I told my grandmother, I just got okayed to borrow $20,000 and buy 20 bred heifers, expecting a little pat on the back, and she looked at me and frowned a little bit. Said, well, all I know is when your grandfather and I were running this farm, we had bred heifers to sell every year. sure helped our bottom line.
Yeah.
She walked away. Well, I put my tail between my legs and walked the other way. Well, I got thinking about it that winter. We were spending $25,000 a year on chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides and antibiotics and hormones, trying to grow crops and not being successful. Our alfalfa fields were being overrun by nutsedge. Our corn fields had velvet leaf taller than the corn. And where we had gone from super high production when my dad first started onto this program, our yields were dropping off, and the soils were dead.
Yeah.
And I realized that there had to be a connection between that money spent and the $1,000 a month that we were spending on vet bills, trying to keep the cows alive and get them bred back, and not being successful. So we started that spring, instead of using a herbicide to establish our hay fields, I used oats as a nurse crop, like my grandfather had done and my dad used to do. And we had a nice crop, beautiful stand of alfalfa, and in 81 we went cold turkey. We started farming 100% organically in 1981.
How much of a risk did that seem?
Well, everybody thought that was a foolish thing to do, that we weren't going to be farming long, that you couldn't farm without chemicals, and it had been drummed into everybody's heads that they were safe and that you could, you couldn't farm without them.
Yeah.
Yet we were having cows die of cancer and infections and every other thing that you could think of. And I remember one of the fields that I had plowed in 79 had been a hay field for 4 years, but before that it was a cornfield. It was one of those intermediate level fields that was usually corn, but every now and then my dad would put it into hay. And I was plowing alfalfa ground and turning up corn stubble that had laid there for 4 years and never been broken down because the soils were dead. There was no life in it at all.
Yep.
So we eventually got to the point where instead of having the veterinary come every week trying to treat cows, within a couple years it was every other week. Then we got to once a month.
Yeah.
And then we got to on demand. And then there was a period of time in the late 90s, early 2000s where we gone 15 years without ever having a vet for a sick cow. The only time we had them on our farm was to trim there, or to dehorn them.
Right.
So in 87 we sold all our spraying equipment and have never looked back. And my sons, the two that are on the farm, one will be 28 in June and one just turned 32, right? They've never known anything but organic farming.
Yeah.
And we got certified in 1984, and we were actually the first certified organic dairy in the United States, possibly the world. I don't know.
So that's 30 years now.
30 plus years now. Yeah, this 37th year, 38th year of farming organically, and.
So we've been talking about the cows. So it's a milking operation.
Primarily.
But you have other things. I want to talk a little bit to Lisa about
Lisa has taken the lead to diversify, and she can explain why we did and how. And she's the one that's responsible for that, done a fantastic job. Yeah.
Well, so you went from cows to, if you go into the organic store that is on your property there, and by the way, someone told me over the weekend, somebody saw me at church and said, well, tell them they need more bacon. Because they keep coming to buy bacon. So that now I've communicated that to you.
If only we could do that.
Yeah. So tell me how you diversified.
Well, as our sons...
Did you get bored with cows? Or?
No, but we saw the need for our farm to be able to support more families. As our sons were graduating from college and coming back to the farm, we realized that we were going to need to diversify to support more families with the same farm.
Yeah.
So we decided we got certified for beef. We actually had a processor that became certified organic in 2004. So that allowed us to label our meat as organic, which prior to that we had not been able to do. And we got certified to have cheese made with our milk. So now we have our own line of cheese. Started growing small-scale vegetables. And it's really worked out well. I mean, any one of the ventures that we're doing probably would not support our families, but with all of them together, it's working really well. So.
And did that take a financial outlay to get started? So
it took a small one, but we started our organic beef herd from within our organic dairy herd by crossbreeding our first calf heifers, dairy heifers, with a beef bull. And then we kept all of those offspring, bred the females back to another beef bull, and kept doing that until we now have a pretty much straight beef herd.
Yeah. Beef bull may be the first time that term has been used on this program. Bull, maybe, but so the store then, people are coming into more of an awareness of the health benefits of things organic.
Yes, people are really starting to want to know how their food is being raised and what's being done to it. You know, from the soil that is growing the crops that the animals are eating, right through what the animals are fed and how they're processed.
Yeah.
And people are starting to become more aware that there are big changes with organic with that.
And what does it take? I mean, you can say things are organic, but you have to be certified organic.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Well, to be certified organic, your land must not have had any synthetic substances like pesticides, herbicides, synthetic fertilizers, anything like that applied to it for at least 3 years prior to the harvest of an organic crop. So ours has been since 1981.
Yeah, you're pretty safe.
Yeah. Our soil's pretty healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Our guests today on Encounter are Lisa and Kevin Engelbert, and they are the matriarch and patriarch, I guess, of the Engelbert farms in Nichols out in Tioga County. You too came from a farm family.
I did.
Yeah.
My parents had a dairy farm in Athens, Pennsylvania. And I've got 4 older brothers, and when none of them decided to stay on the farm, my dad sold the cows. Didn't wait for me, but
Yeah, right.
you know,
What
but that's
would you know?
okay.
Yeah.
I ended up in a real good place. So,
Yeah.
but we still own that land, and that's where our beef herd is. Actually, in the summertime, we pasture them
Yeah.
down there.
So that's, we were talking about how much acreage you have. You own a certain number of acres, and then you lease pasture land and so on.
Right.
Can you, I know on your website it breaks down, I don't know whether you have this in your head, you probably do, but how much is wooded, how much is pasture, how much is used?
It's somewhat fluid, but we probably have around 300 to 400 acres of woodland. Then we grew 330 acres of field corn last year, 180 acres of soybeans, about 80 acres of wheat, and then the rest of it, which is probably around 1,500 acres, was a hay ground. Either along the river where we took 2 or 3 or 4 cuttings off from, or hill ground up on the hills that we rent, where we only take 1 cutting of grass hay.
And pasture.
And then also pasture.
Yes.
We've got 300 acres or more of pasture ground. Probably closer to 400 now, because we continue to fence in more, because one of the requirements of certified organic is that a certain percentage of the animal's feed has to come from pasture.
Yeah.
So we do provide a lot of pasture for our animals.
Are there surrounding farms that are not organic that would threaten your land because of their proximity to the organic soil and so on?
Lisa can probably address that. She works for NOFA New York, the Northeast Organic Farming Association, also, besides all the work she does on the farm. So
Yeah.
she
And
can-
our office is in Binghamton. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
We do have to have buffer zones where